Let's get started with today's commentary for episode 114. Is fatigue getting in your way?
Well, last week we did being tired, and I promised that I would really show the difference between being fatigued and being tired. I think most of us are more fatigued than tired, so there was definitely a need. And based on, I had a few comments in the community with people wanted to know really how can they overcome their fatigue and inertia. I mean, people are pretty drained. It's because they're juggling so many different jobs, from being a householder to running a full-time job. And then if you have pets and children, that's another whole drain.
Sure.
In addition to the drain of technology, keeping up with technology, so you could find out where your emails are, that kind of thing. So I thought it was pretty a pretty good idea to follow through with the idea of being tired, fatigue, and in the podcast, if people want, I really talk about diet principles, because we could talk about fatigue in so many different ways. I could talk about breathing mechanisms for fatigue. I could talk about meditation. I can talk about many things, but I wanted to focus more on the dietary practices in this episode.
Right. I often, listening to the podcast, I was trying to hone in on the difference between being tired or fatigued. It made sense to me because, yeah, you get tired every now and then, but fatigue is more, pressing and more chronic, I think, at least for me. Less so much the acute, but every now and then if you work too much, or we talked last time about overusing, the
Right.
energy, then yeah, you tend to be more fatigued over time. So then you have to have some remedies. And I like your approach of using digestive function as the core aspect of it.
Well, it's always about rooting up the cause. Remember, there's two functions that we go by in you and I have been talking. It's we have to find the cause and then root it up.
Right.
And then we restore our function by doing that. And so what I wanted to talk about is I really wanted to talk about that whole idea. We become fatigued when our system starts shutting down. And I mean, it really goes on the organ level. And if we look at digestive function as the core, as the root of everything, we could master our health. And that was the whole purpose. You and I have talked about self mastery for about, what, 25 years now.
Right.
And how do we really master the health of our life? Well, it starts with the digestive system. And I'm not new to say that. If you look at Ayurvedic medicine or even traditional Chinese medicine, these are ancient traditions of let's look at the core, let's look at the digestive system. Only now, which is interesting, and I say within the last decade, has Western medicine, in its reductionist model approach, said, hey, wait a minute, let's now talk about the gut microbiome. So they're taking, again, one little aspect of it and seeing a correlation, which is a good start. It's a good start for awareness, and we can work with that. So today, I really wanted to focus in on fatigue in the way that we're really talking about our digestive function, because it's not just being tired, it's the system is starting to get too much buildup. Remember we spoke about ama, you really like that one, where that toxic buildup, almost that sticky glue, that's really those subtle beautiful channels that are all our energies flowing through are getting glue on them, and they're not able to operate. It's almost like getting in sticky mud. And so how do we remove that, or how do we even know if we have it, before we even remove it? So,
Right. The signs, I think, are really important to hone in on in terms of, if you're starting to see signs of imbalance in your digestive function. The lack of appetite. So, I like to fast a lot. So, I'll have to watch that in myself when, I just don't want to eat or I want to fast versus, I'm feeling something that maybe there's a signal telling me that I shouldn't be eating.
yeah, when we have a lack of appetite, chances are there's something going on. And it's the beginning stages of it, because we want to have that feeling of hunger. And I always tell people, wait, say you have lack of appetite. People sometimes are conditioned that they have to eat in the morning upon waking up. Well, that's not the case for everyone. I know for me, a decade ago, it wasn't the case. Now it is the case that I like to eat in the morning when I get up. But then again, I don't eat late at night. So each person is a unique individual biochemically. But watching your appetite is a true sign of deciding whether you should not eat, fast, miss a meal. Let's call it skip a meal, because intermittent fasting has really gotten polluted in this country again. People get an idea and they start talking about fasting with it not really understanding the principles of what they're really trying to accomplish. And how to get into a fast and how to get out are just as important as the actual fast itself.
Right.
And yeah, I did my master's and my PhD theses on fasting and starvation. So when I see some of these things that are out there with, skipping meals, fasting in a very erratic way, it causes more harm. But let's not get off the subject, because we could do a whole commentary just on fasting.
We should. Yeah, we'll
Fasting.
put it on the
Yeah.
list.
Yeah, you know what? Let me write it on the list right now. Fasting, is it right for you? That would be a good one to do.
While you're writing that down, do you think an increase in appetite has some correlation as well, or just lack of appetite in terms of poor digestive function?
Well, increase is much better off unless
Okay.
you're on medications, and a lot of medications will cause an increased appetite. So yes, that's a barometer, but not in the sense of having clogged low digestive function. The low digestive function would be more the stagnation, the lack of appetite,
Okay.
whereas the increase is an overutilization. That would be something a little bit different. But you know what? Instead of saying, so lack of appetite is with poor digestion. But if we want to assess digestive function in general, we can look at appetite. So what we want to do, and then that, of course, affects our mind. I used to say a gassy gut creates a foggy mind. I mean, it's that literal. That's what's so beautiful about the whole thing. And uh, so we want to look at that. We also want to look at, I'll just mention a couple that we did in the podcast and for that episode. And if more people want it, they can listen to all of them. But one of the other ones that really stands out is, how often do we catch colds, or do we get flu-like symptoms, or do we feel, ill? Because remember, 60% of our lymphoid tissue, which is our immune system, our immune tissue, is housed in the gut. So if our gut is clogged and it's not operating to full potential, what's going to happen? We're going to have more colds, more, allergies. All of these things are related to that. So
Right.
it's something that people
Okay.
might want to consider.
Of course. Yeah. So I get the general sense, if something is off, whether it's you're feeling lazy or tired, or some unknown or unquantifiable sense of, I'm not just feeling right, that could be a sign of poor digestion. So we need to look at all these things.
Right. And then once we say, hey, wait a minute, my digestion just doesn't feel right.
Hmm.
Or even after you eat, you can create, a stomach distension, for example. The stomach starts to swell a little bit, too much gas. You feel the food's not going in. And, when I've done workshops with people, everyone, it's unanimous when I say this. Doesn't food taste better when you feel hungry, when you're getting to eat, versus when you're just inhaling things that you don't even need to be eating?
It sure
We're
does. Yeah.
eating, yeah, we're eating out of boredom, or we're tired. But when we're really hungry, and that's why I tell people, I really emphasize, don't eat in between, don't snack, because it really takes that edge off, that fire burning. It puts too much, remember, wet wood on the fire, and
Right.
that's really the key. So the digestive function again is key, and there are practical strategies, to clear these, the toxins. I'm using toxin as a very loose word, but to clean that ama out, that
Build
undigested
up.
material,
Yeah.
build up. Nicely said, yes. And there are some things that we can do.
I like seeing it or visualizing it as a build up, and then, if something is off, you can get a sense of, oh, what is building up and how can I address it, or as you say, root it out.
Yes, of course. And the first thing is we want to be, and this might sound like it's a little off, but if we get the proper rest, when we get in bed and rest, I don't want to say even get in bed, when we start resting by 10 p.m., sleep and rest, what happens is the body's natural ability to upgrade its do its house cleaning duties, I call it, because the liver upgrades. So that's where a lot of our detoxification takes place. There's two phases in the liver where that takes place. So if we're still digesting, it's not going to switch over and do it, do its full potential. So by resting meaning don't eat at night. And I've said this for decades now. People are realizing it after, the books that I've written and the things that I've done. You could hear it now. People are aware, don't eat right before you go to bed. So that's why we really want to let the system do its upgrading and its regulation of cleansing. And that happens for the brain also. Our cleansing mechanisms happen. So we don't want to be eating at night. So when I say go to bed or rest by 10, that means stop eating. Go rest. And for some, going to sleep is important. And you're better off getting up early, 3:30, 4, and going to bed early at 10 rather than going to bed at 11 or 12 and getting up at 6. Those hours really make a difference because you're eating and you're resting in tune with your metabolic clock.
Right. The chart that you created, or that we created rather, helped do the artwork for the book on the circadian rhythm and that clock
Yeah.
and the cycle that you based both on, Chinese medicine as well as Ayurvedic cycles. I use that as reference. It's fantastic for the 10 to 2, and then throughout the day, when to eat, the peak hours for digestion, for example. So instead of eating your biggest meal for dinner, it's during the peak digestion hours, as you say.
If we can. I was actually going to bring that up. Remember when for Feeling Good Matters, you designed the chart for me
Yeah.
as I was doing it.
I
And
still use it as a reference.
I
Absolutely.
was going to bring that up. I'm writing with the new book that I'm writing. I was debating whether I should put it in there or not, but I don't think.
Absolutely. I think it's very important. We should all use it. In fact, I want to appify it because it's so good in terms of visual reference for what you should be
Yeah.
doing based on your constitution.
Yeah, and I didn't make that up. That's from traditional Chinese medicine and Ayurvedic medicine. In fact, I think we did 2 in there that actually gives you the variation because there's just just a little bit slightly different. That's all.
Sure. Yeah.
And
Okay. So I think we probably don't need to rehash all of the practical strategies. Folks should just listen to the podcast to get those.
right.
So that was a great overview. Is there a new takeaway perhaps that you want to impart to the community about these strategies for, detecting the signs of poor digestion?
Yeah, I would just say after you eat a meal, give yourself 1 to 2 hours after and really start assessing. You could use what's so great about diet is you can use it, we can call it food sadhana. It's your food practice. It's your practice to really see what's going on physically as well as emotionally and mentally. So for 3 days to a week, in fact, the Feeling Good Matters book, I always have a journaling exercise in each lesson that we have in there because the journal is what will really help you. So, for example, I noticed we started this that I just got a Dutch oven and I'm going to start making my own bread. And I'm doing the experiments with certain flours from Europe rather than the flours from the United States because the flours from the United States all contain glyphosate. It's not the gluten that's causing the problem in 90 or 80% of the cases, and I'm making that number up. It's the glyphosate that's really causing disturbance. Because everyone I speak to talks about it and says, okay, I could go to Europe. Why could I go to Europe and eat the pastries and the breads? I don't gain weight. I don't feel sick. It's because they're not chemically polluted. And if people start becoming aware, so that comes back to what you're saying, how do we detect? I pay attention when I eat something or drink something. How do I feel after that? As soon as I have any wheat product in the United States, from United States wheat, not from Italy and not from France, I find that I will start feeling a tad anxious. It's amazing. And I know how to use probiotics to get over that, but I'm doing the experiment now, and I'll keep everyone posted, where I'm not doing that. I'm only getting goods from not manufactured in the United States and not from United States wheat, but from Europe. And I find that I do not have a problem. So that's what we do. When you said, how can we start working on our gut? Pay attention to your diet. It's that easy. Some foods you like and some foods you don't. Pay attention to that. Why is that? And you know how you can tell the health of your The health of your digestive system is how you really feel after you eat, or are you craving foods that are not good for you? If you're craving foods that are not good for you, I can tell you that your digestive system is not healthy.
I love that signal because we
That's a
probably
real
all get it
signal.
all the time.
And I don't even think I put that in the episode, that podcast. It just came to me now. If you find yourself like, wow, I just I just want to have, you're craving things that aren't good for you. It's one of two things. It's either your digestive system is disrupted or you're missing some of the tastes in your food. You're not including all the tastes in your food. You're just eating one thing. And that's what happens when we overdo animal protein. Then we start craving, when we eat a lot of protein, we want to crave things that have sweetness. We want to crave things that are more carbohydrate. So it's very interesting. Our body will tell us it regulates. Just pay attention. Remain calm, consciously aware, living in the moment. And what does that translate to? Pay attention. Be aware. Once we're aware, life gets really to be fun. We start learning that we have control over our life and our health. And that's really a takeaway. But we need the discipline. And the discipline doesn't mean do things you don't want to do necessarily. It just means practice. Practice, 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 because that's all life is a practice.